the one which was deferred from 26th October. We have the machinery, a set of microphones here, and when you speak, please, you have to keep your finger on the microphone, on the button. Otherwise, it doesn't capture your voice. So welcome to the committee. Well, can you all hear me?
We can, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering if the live stream has started. We need to ensure that the public have access.
Yeah, the live stream has started. For the purpose of public transparency and accountability, this meeting will be live streamed online. Details of how to access the live stream have been made available on the Council's website. For health and safety reasons and in accordance with our risk assessment, members of the public are asked to follow the meeting via this method and cannot attend any physical meeting in person. Members of the public wishing to speak at the meeting have given notice and they will have 3 minutes each to speak. Can I have apologies for absence, please?
Apologies have been received from Councillors Brackstone, Hope, Mackenzie, Mason and Windress. Councillor Graham will substitute for Councillor Mackenzie. No substitutes have been received from Councillors Brackstone, Hope, Mason or Windress.
Thank you. Can I confirm that we actually have a quorum?
That's correct, Chairman. We have 6 members tonight. Quorum is 3.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Goodrick?
Thank you, Chairman. I should declare that there are some applications which I believe are within the AONB this evening, and I'm a member of the AONB Joint Advisory Committee in my role as the North Yorkshire County Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 11, Thornton Clay. I've been lobbied by email and letter and verbally. It's personal, non-prejudicial, non-pecuniary.
Councillor Graham?
I'm also a member of the Joint Advisory Committee to the AONB, so it same applies to me as to Councillor.
Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've been lobbied on item number 11, the White Swan, personal, non-pecuniary, non-prejudicial. Thank you.
I also have been lobbied on number 11, and yes, personal, non-pecuniary. I also know one of the objectors in the Little Bath case, which is number 9. I don't believe I do have I do have an interest, a prejudicial interest in this instance, because she's a friend of my wife and not of mine. But in order to play safe, I shall leave the room for that item, and ask Councillor Potter to take the meeting at that point.
Chairman, can I also declare I've been lobbied on item 11? Thank you, Mr.
Yes. Has everybody else been lobbied on item 11?
Yes, I've received letters which I've passed on to the planning department.
Councillor Graham, have you been lobbied on item 11? Right, the next item is the minutes of the last meeting. Can I have somebody to propose them as a correct record, please? Councillor Cleary. Councillor Potter has seconded it. Do we all agree? Can I take that as a general affirmation? Urgent business. I have no urgent business, but I thought it would be appropriate to ask the officers to update us on the work of the local plan review working party. So I'll ask Jill Thompson to do that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just in terms of an update on the local plan, we have effectively released all of the sites that have been put forward through the call for sites and informed people of where they can look at those sites and send in their comments. That'll be a sort of an ongoing consultation really throughout the course of the review. At last night's Policy and Resources Committee, a consultation document was agreed. That's the document that sets out questions around the strategic distribution of development options for how we might amend the plan moving forward. So that's a key stage in the process, and we'll look to start that consultation this side of Christmas as soon as we can, really. It's likely that it will run in excess of the normal 6 weeks just to cover the Christmas period. Running alongside that, what we're also trying to do in terms of keeping to the timetable that we've established is to commission as much of the outstanding evidence base that we need in order to start to make some key decisions in the spring of next year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you, Jill. We now go on to the schedule of items to be determined by the committee. And the first item is the land off Daskett Hill, Sheriff Hutton. I think this is yours. Is this yours, Lieve? If I can. It's the change of use of agricultural and equestrian land to allow the siting of 16 number holiday lodges, 1 number Warden's Lodge, with associated access, parking infrastructure and landscaping. And the application number is 20-00701 MFUL.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If we could just have the aerial map, which I think is the first document. Thank you. The application site relates to the agricultural field to the north of Sheriff Hutton, which is directly to the west of Daskett Hill, from where it's accessed. It's also to the north of Cornborough Road, and probably the best orientation is it's to the northwest of the roundabout at the north of the village. The site's broadly rectangular and it's adjoined by residential properties to the south, along the south of Cornborough Road, and by agricultural land to the west, north and east. The site is located outside of the defined settlement limits of the village, therefore it's considered as being located within the wider open countryside in terms of the plan. The site is located at a significant distance from both the village's conservation area boundary, which is approximately 250 metres to the south, and also approximately 225 metres from the scheduled ancient monument boundary of Sheriff Hutton Castle. And beyond both, there's significant amounts of existing development. The site incorporates ridge and furrow formations, and the Howardian Hills area of outstanding natural beauty is located approximately 3.6 kilometres to the north. As you can appreciate from the aerial map, the site incorporates very thick landscaping to the southern and eastern boundaries with hedgerows and trees. The western boundary incorporates a mature field hedge with more intermittent trees. There's also more sporadic mature landscaping to the immediate northern boundary, but from certain public views, the site also benefits from wider additional field screening. The application description has been read. The precise form and siting of the holiday lodges is discussed in more detail within the officer's report. The holiday lodges themselves will be located a minimum of 40 metres inset from the domestic curtilages of the properties located to the south of Cornborough Road, with the very mature screening also present along that southern boundary, and I'll go through the photographs in a moment. The proposal would also include the provision of a surface water attenuation pond to the southwestern corner and a children's play area also along the southern boundary. The proposal will incorporate an access road spanning westwards from the existing field entrance, which you can see on the image there. And there'll be a pedestrian link at the southeastern corner of the site to allow for permeability with the village. So I can just go through the photographs now. If we could move to the first one. This is the existing site access, which is a field entrance from Dasket Hill. And the next photograph along is a view towards the western boundary from within the site. And that was where there's the mature field hedge with more intermittent planting. The next photograph shows the view towards the very kind of thick and mature southern boundary, and the next one is a view more towards the southeastern corner of the site. The next photograph is looking towards the northern boundary of the site from sort of along the eastern part, and the next one is again another view of that northern boundary. And you can appreciate there is landscape in there is some planting, but it is a little bit more sporadic than the other three boundaries. The next one is actually a picture taken from about the northern boundary of the site looking northwards, and you can see the levels of the site begin to fall at that point. And the next photograph sort of shows you that from a different way. So this is from land which is to the north of the application site looking southwards. So the next one, we're coming out onto sort of Dasket Hill itself, and this one is actually showing another extra row of boundary landscaping beyond the application site to the north. So it sort of benefits from 2 rows of landscaping, but this more northerly one is sort of less sporadic than the one immediately to the north of the site. So effectively it is really a double row of planting. The one at the immediate northern boundary to be improved, and this one below it. The next photograph is basically that same view again, but from a little bit more northerly of a viewpoint. And the next one again is a view from Dasket Hill looking at the very good screening along the eastern boundary. And I have to apologise, this next one sort of almost jumps back to where we were before. It's that view again from the north. And this measures about 325 metres away from the site boundary. So the next photograph again is showing from Dasket Hill, again that very thick landscaping along the eastern boundary. And then the next photograph takes us to kind of a direct look at the corner of the site where the roundabout is and where Dasket Hill meets Cornborough Road. And you can just see to the left-hand side of the picture some of the properties along Cornborough Road there. And then the next photograph is sort of the same again. The next one is just really appreciating the mature landscaping along the southern boundary of Cornborough Road. And the next photograph is looking back towards the southern boundary again, but from a westerly viewpoint. And you can just see the junction where Laurel's Garth is there. So if we could just go back to the aerial map, that would be great. So, as you'll appreciate in the officer's report, we have received 6 letters of objection and 1 letter of support, and a letter from the parish council that doesn't object but that does raise certain conditions they feel are necessary and concerns they have. These have all been summarised in the report, and members have been able to review these in full. In terms of the principle of the development, it's considered that the proposal for tourism accommodation is broadly acceptable in principle in this location, in line with policy SP8. This also relates to the diversification of an established agricultural business, which accords with policy SP9. This would, however, be the subject of time-limited occupancy conditions for new holiday accommodation. This would prevent the units being used for residential purposes and will ensure that they're available for holiday lettings. The agent has acknowledged the occupancy conditions within the plan and statement they provided. In terms of character and form, this proposed development has been very carefully considered in relation to its impact on the application site and also the adjoining land, and it has been subject to detailed negotiation. A landscape and visual impact assessment was produced, which was analysed within the officer's report. And as part of that, new planting has been carefully considered and updated landscape and details have been submitted for the site's northern boundary following a request for more mature planting. This illustrates the installation of a native instant hedge along the northern boundary at a height of 2 metres with 16 heavy standard native species trees being proposed. There's also 14 new trees proposed for installation along the western boundary, again heavy standard native species. However, notwithstanding that, a condition relating to landscaping is still recommended, as whilst we have got very detailed and suitable mature planting to the boundaries of the site, we haven't quite got the details of internal landscaping. So a condition is recommended. As detailed in the report, it's not considered that this proposal would result in harm to the special character and appearance of the AONB, which is 3.6 kilometres to the north. The AONB officer was informally consulted as part of this application and they confirmed they had no objection. They'd noted that any light from the AONB would be read as part of the lighting from the settlement itself. Notwithstanding this, it does remain appropriate to include a full lighting condition to secure what is appropriate lighting in a dark area of the village. Additionally, it's considered that the lodges themselves, which have detailed in the report, appear to be of a very high quality design and materials, which include timber cladding and dark grey standing seam roofs. The overall siting and scale and layout, together with the position in the access road, is also considered acceptable. We do appreciate and acknowledge the concerns raised by third parties in relation to this sensitive edge of village location and the potential adverse impacts upon the character are noted. But it's considered that following analysis of the LVIA and subject to the recommended conditions, that this wouldn't materially harm or impact the character of the area due to sensitive landscaping and lighting proposals. It's also not considered that this would result in visual overdevelopment of the site. It will alter the present character of the agricultural equestrian field, but it's considered that it can be undertaken without material harm. In terms of amenity, as indicated within the submitted consultation responses, representations have been made by third parties indicating their concerns. It's noted that as part of the revised plans, the Warden's Lodge with reception and small shop has been repositioned more centrally within the site. The Council's Environmental Health team have been consulted in relation to this proposal. The officer requested a noise impact assessment and this was provided. Whenever they reviewed this, the Environmental Health Officer noted the following. The distance from neighbouring residents and the intervening road is likely to be sufficient to protect neighbouring residents from undue disturbance from noise. However, care will have to be taken if, for example, they choose to site a play area. Therefore, I have no objection subject to either a condition requiring a noise management plan or its submission as part of the application. This noise management plan condition has been recommended and will be submitted to and agreed in writing prior to the occupation of the site with further consultation with environmental health officers. It's therefore considered that subject to that condition, this wouldn't result in additional material harm to neighbouring amenity. In terms of access and highway safety, the North Yorkshire Highways officers confirmed they have no objection to the proposal following negotiations undertaken with the applicant's highway consultants. This was actually assessed using the more rigorous level of design standard for busier roads. During the determination period, improvements have been made to car parking, which is now in line with the highway standards, and it's considered that this will help to ensure it wouldn't have an adverse effect on the surrounding road network. In terms of drainage, the site drainage would involve connection to main sewers and the provision of a surface water attenuation pond. This was fully discussed in the officer's report, and the consultations from Yorkshire Water, the Internal Drainage Board and the Lead Local Flood Authority were detailed, and appropriate conditions have been recommended. Additionally, appropriate ecological conditions have also been detailed. Therefore, to conclude, the proposed additional holiday accommodation has been carefully considered and in principle it's considered to be acceptable subject to the recommended conditions, including the occupancy conditions, the highway conditions, the submission of the noise management plan, further details of lighting and the proposed landscaping scheme, and the discharging of the drainage conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. It may be a moot point, but I was wondering about the future impacts on the development limits of Sheriff Hutton. So what would the status of this land be if or when holiday home development ends?
Sorry, did you say whatever holiday home development ends? I mean,
Chairman, as it stands at the moment, it's open countryside, and that's how it would remain. It's clearly these types of uses usually are in an open countryside location. I appreciate your comment that it's close to the village, but in development limit terms, it wouldn't change things in itself.
So if the holiday home development ended for whatever reason, it wouldn't be regarded as a brownfield site and the development limits expanded already?
I wouldn't say it wouldn't be regarded as a brownfield site, because clearly it's a site that's no longer in agricultural use, but it's not a residential use in the sense that we would regard it as a normal residential use. That you've got the established built-up areas where, in principle, permanent residential uses are acceptable.
Right, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you. Yes, I was just thinking to pick up on what Councillor Potter, and I think I understand his concern. So if this venture ceases, should we have a clause that says everything has to be removed from the site and it return to its normal use?
It's a matter of judgment whether or not you feel that meets the test of conditions, Chairman. I don't think can't remember us applying that condition. Looking backwards at Jill, see whether she can remember. I can't remember us applying that condition to any other holiday occupancy type of development. Obviously we get a huge range of types of different things to consider, but I can't remember explicitly having a condition saying ye shall clear the site and restore it to agriculture. I think the reasonableness of that, you'd have to sort of look at the extent of the scheme that's before you, and clearly there's a lot of roads and various bits and pieces that go into making this type of development what it is. So I think I would be erring on the side of thinking it probably wouldn't meet the reasonable test of conditions.
Are there any more questions? I believe we have one speaker, the agent, Killian Gallagher. Are you there?
I am, Chair, yes, if you can hear me.
Would you, we can hear you, yes. Would you like to speak, please? You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Killian Gallagher and I'm the agent for this application. The applicant is Steeners Farms, which is owned by the Easterby family who reside locally to Sheriff Hutton. I would firstly like to thank the Planning Officer, Niamh Bonner, for working with us to get to this point whereby the application is recommended for approval this evening. The 16 proposed holiday lodges have been designed to provide a high-quality tourist accommodation offer for the village. We have also proposed a Warden's Lodge to ensure that the site is managed appropriately. The site is within easy walking distance to the village's services and facilities, and we believe that there is no comparable accommodation in the area at present. The proposed development is a farm diversification project, which we know will have socio-economic benefits for the district as a whole by meeting a growing demand for high-quality tourist accommodation in the area. We have worked extensively with officers to address any concerns that arose during the consideration of the application, including the comments of the Parish Council. For example, and as Niamh mentioned in her words, we had the landscape and visual impact of the scheme considered by an expert. And as Niamh said, supplementary planting to the site's northern boundary has been proposed and will form the subject of a condition. We also submitted a noise impact assessment which concluded the development would not give rise to noise impact issues. I believe this project will be a great addition to Sheriff Hutton and will bring economic benefits and employment opportunities to the village. I therefore respectfully ask that you consider supporting the application this evening. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. just to check, because I mean, I know this list of speakers was put together 2 weeks ago. Are there any other speakers? And when so there are no other speakers, then I'll put the matter to debate. Councillor Hope isn't here, so who wishes to go first? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've said, I'm not the local member, but I think I'm probably live nearest to it, and I know the site and the area quite well. Yes, I think this passes all the tests that we need to support it. When I first saw the application, I thought, well, that's very close to the village. Is it visible from the village before the report came out? It isn't. Not only that, but I drove towards Terrington, top of Terrington Bank. You can make out where it is, but it's a very distant view of the site. And given the information from Neve's report, it is very well screened. As I say, as the agent reports, and I would concur, it is a high quality project. It endeavours to bring a high quality development to the village, and I think the economic benefits will accrue from it, and therefore I'm happy to move approval. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's in my division for North Yorkshire County Council. I'm happy to second it, but with a caveat. I am concerned about the access on and off the site on Dasket Hill. It's a very difficult piece of road as you enter into the village on an uphill trajectory, and it's quite a fast piece of road as well. And I noticed the the parish council have mentioned those concerns in their report, so I do think it's just worth noting that we could have some issues with regard to traffic, but I'm happy to second it.
That's seconding it, unqualified, subject to the conditions recommended by the officers. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, it's just an observation really. I drove down the road to Sheriff Hutton the other day, and as I have done on many occasions, and I expect most people in this room will have done, I'm afraid from my point of view, I think it's a very good application, a very good scheme, but I think it's going to destroy one of the approaches to Sheriff Hutton medieval historical landscape, and given that there's a lot of land around Sheriff Hutton, there could be somewhere more discreet and less obtrusive than this, and that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Well, in that case, it has been proposed and seconded. Can we put the matter to the vote, please?
Chairman, do you wish me to just quickly read out names? And
yes, please, Gary.
Thank you. Right, thank you, Chairman. This is item 6. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Councillor Cleary.
4.
Councillor Goodrick.
4.
Councillor Graham.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Thackeray.
Abstain.
Thank you, Chairman. That's 5 votes for and 1 abstention, Chairman. So the application is approved.
Thank you. Can we go on to the next item, please, which is application number 21/00727 MFUL, in Hutton, the erection of a general purpose agricultural building for farm produce and housing machinery and livestock at West Farm, Riggs Road, Ryedale, Norton. Are you dealing with this, Neve?
Thank you, Chairman. In fact, it would have been Alan Goforth, but he can't be with us tonight, so he's delegated it upwards to me to present to members tonight.
Right, well, thank you, Gary.
And as you can see from the report, this application is a major application, so that's why it's before members for determination this evening. We've not actually had any objections to the scheme as such, although there is an update from the report that was presented, or would have been presented to members on the 26th of October. Members will note that there was an outstanding lead local flood authority comment at that point in proceedings. And in the intervening period, we have received confirmation from the lead local flood authority that they're now happy with the surface water drainage details that have been submitted with the application. So they are content that the application can be approved. They have, however, recommended an additional condition, which is their standard drainage detail condition, which would be recommended as condition number 6 to append to the recommendation that is on page 67. So there are no more updates than that, Chairman, but I just thought I'd quickly run through the photographs because it's in quite a sort of remote area to the north of Ryedale and Great Hutton. So if we can go to the first photograph, Chairman. In fact, this photograph shows the access point at the southern part of the photograph. That actually is Riggs Road going left to right off the screen there, where it says Google. And Riggs Road is the very minor road that's located to the north of Great Hutton before you get to Kirby Misperton. So you turn off right, and if you go down that narrow lane long enough, you come back out at Ryedale. So it's part way along that road in the middle of a very flat part of the landscape locally. West Farm itself is then set back quite a considerable distance from the access point, which is a narrow surface tarmacked access which serves West Farm, but it also serves another residential property called White Lily, which is about halfway along that access way. It's a private access way. You'll see from the aerial photograph there that there is there's quite a significant group of farm buildings, and there is a shelter belt already around it. It's quite a well-established one. So the application site for this building is as close as it can get to that shelter belt. And I think you'll see from the plans in the agenda papers that some additional planting is proposed to the north of the site just to shield it and soften it from some public rights of way which are much further to the north, but nevertheless you get a view back towards the complex. From the access point, it's very difficult to actually see the site from the south. So if you can go to the next photo, this is the view from that access point. So you can see the group, the group of the access way heading away north in front of you, and the farm buildings are behind the shelter belt, which is on the group of trees on the right-hand side there. So I think in the distance, it's hard for me to see from here, but there's a row of bales, and they're just beyond the application site. So that's as much as a view that you would get if you're right on the access way. So we can have the next photo, please. This is going further along the track, so you get more of a feel of how well established that shelter belt is. And the next one, please. And this is where the road goes through the shelter belt to the existing farmstead. And the position of the proposed dwelling is actually to the left-hand side of the access at this point. So if you can pan round. And so it's in this area here, and just keep panning round. And that's where the building would sit. And I think there's some more photographs then just taking the view back down the access way. So you can just carry on. And again, this is looking back towards the shelter belt further from the north. So in this position, the new building would be on the right-hand end of where the shelter belt is currently situated, and more planting would be proposed from this access way. And I think that might be the last photo. Oh, sorry, this is one closer to the access, the shelter belt again. So I think that's probably the last photograph. So there are no more updates than that, Chairman. As I say, it's on committee because it's a major application and therefore requires a committee decision.
Thank you, Gary. Now, am I right in thinking that there are no speakers on this one?
No speakers at all, Chairman.
Do any members have any questions? if there are no questions, I'm not the member for Hutton, but I actually live there, so I think perhaps I'll propose it. It's good to see agricultural buildings being built and being used for agricultural purposes. I think one of the most important functions of the countryside is to produce food, and the farming industry should be encouraged, so I would propose it. Councillor Cleary?
I can't say any more than you have, other than to say I'm seconding your proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Does anybody wish to speak? Can we go to the vote then, please, Gary? Can you take the names?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Andrews?
For?
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Graham?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's approved 6 votes to 0, Chairman.
Thank you. Item number 8, which is the erection of building comprising 1 number units for Class E, B2 and E8 uses, with Unit 9A dedicated to a bespoke children's nursery, together with associated car park and landscaping, land to the south of Cherry Farm Close, Norton. Who's speaking on this?
Again, another one of Alan's, Chairman, that he's asked me to present for him tonight. In fact, Chairman, there are absolutely no updates to this application, so it is as recommended in the agenda papers. I won't labour the point because this is a site that's probably well known to members. We've granted outline permission for the entirety of the site many years ago in 2010-11, and we've dealt with a number of detailed or reserve matters applications for various plots as the industrial extension to York Road has proceeded. And indeed, this application site is one that has already had a detailed permission on it, as you'll have noted from the agenda papers. And it is simply a different scheme that is before us today, which is for 11 units, which include the new use Class E, which came in earlier this, I think it was this year, or say this year, it might have been last now, B2 and B8. It's a use class which incorporates the former B1 uses and a variety of other specific uses, including things such as children's nurseries. And that's one of the elements which is Unit 9A is particularly identified as being identified for that use. And I'll come back to that in a moment because the parish council, which in this case is Hutton Zambo, had expressed some concern that they couldn't see any identified outer area for the children. In fact, there are. It's just not very well shown on the plan, Chairman. And what I would stress is that condition number 9 that's recommended does require further detail of the boundary treatment for that unit, plus the landscaping of it as well, which is proposed to be reserved by way of condition. So if we can just go on to the photographs, Chairman. This is an aerial photograph looking at the York Road, I'll call it the extension area. So to the left-hand side, you can see the A64 and the slip road off to the left. So if you're coming from York, you take the left slip road off and enter York Road. And equally, if you're coming from York Road, then you take the slip road on. So that's where this site is. And to orient members completely, then just in the triangle between York Road and the A64, you can see Tara Park plus the extension area on the opposite side of the road. So this is the newest part of the York Road industrial estate. And at this point, although it's the approach to the town of Malton, it's actually located mainly within the parish of Hutton Zambo. So that's where you are. And cropped up on the screen there. Not sure what that is. Can you? Is it possible to get rid of that message on the screen? Right across my aerial photograph. And can I have the image back, please? Thank you. Right, and as you can see, the entrance to the industrial estate has been there a few years now. comes to the south of York Road between Propac and a number of buildings. So you've got buildings there that are used. I think one of them's Tool Station, and you come in through there. The road winds to the west and then heads in a southerly direction into the area, which is including the current application site. And the current site is effectively at the southern extremity of where the industrial estate has got to at the moment. So if you can take to the next photograph, please. So this is that approach road from York Road. This is the inner estate road, and you can see units are coming out of the ground already. And the plot is the vacant area to the left-hand side of the glazed unit. You can see there. The next photo, please. So this is just panning round towards the sort of southern and eastern boundaries of the plot. And the next, please. So this is looking back at that glazed unit. So the plot is actually behind the terrace fencing that you can see in front of you. And the next photo, please. And this is just panning across towards the what is effectively the eastern boundary. So that was the old part of the established industrial area. So as you can see that, although it appears on the plan as a continuation of the industrial area, there is already some established landscaping from the old part of the industrial estate. The next, please. And this is just panning around across the plot. And the next. And I think that's about it, Chairman. Yeah, thank you. I have no further updates, Chairman, other than to say that, again, this is an application that, aside from the detailed comment from the Parish Council, has not raised any other issues. We have no technical objections to it. As far as I'm aware, there are no speakers registered to speak either tonight, Chairman, so it is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Gary. Are there any questions? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gary, you were going to mention a bit more about the outdoor space available, because the Parish Council did raise just a query rather than an objection, but you said you had more information.
To be blunt, the drawings weren't particularly well detailed in terms of what they were showing as be the outdoor play area. But if members look at page 87, where it says plot 9A, you can see that it's on the end, the western end of the building. You see, it's a narrower part. That there isn't as much footprint on the western end. That's the nursery building, and that whole area is proposed to be landscaped, but there is an inner boundary that becomes a sort of fenced off area, as I'll describe it. But we don't have the detail of the extent of that, and the plan didn't describe it. So I think there is scope there, to find out what the detail is so we can agree what it is, so it looks right, because it's on the front of the plot, but also be looking, I would suggest, at a slightly bigger area than what we've got at the moment.
Councillor Thackeray. But by the way, just a moment, Councillor Graham. I have the screen in the way, so if you put your hand up and I don't see it, please shout. Yes, please. Councillor Thackeray.
A few questions, actually. I see that it is possibly closest to some of our best friends who shall remain nameless, i.e. Yorkshire Water. Sewage treatment works. Is there any odour issue related to that treatment works? I'm told that there is plenty of spillage into the River Derwent, according to the operatives. Next question is, how many car journeys is this development going to add in respect of parents delivering children, all these different units, and will there be any facility for footpath, cycle path from the town for parents who wish to bring their children by bicycle to the nursery?
I think the first question you made was, or raised, was one of odour. I have to say I've been to the site twice now and haven't personally detected it, but we are next to a treatment plant, so I'm not suggesting, there might be a situation on a cold November morning with a temperature inversion, you might detect an odour, because that's what you sometimes get around treatment works, but I've not detected anything, and we haven't had any adverse comments come in because of the proximity of the treatment plant, which is on the other side of the old part of the industrial estate, as you know. So as far as I'm aware, there are no issues pertaining to odour that came to the light when we first dealt with the potential expansion of the industrial estate, lock, stock and barrel into that area, or potentially any more sensitive uses that might... Sorry, let my finger slip off there. So that's that. I mean, in terms of the original planning permission, which we're going back a few years now for the planning permission, there was certainly concern in relation to the amount of car-borne traffic that the estate might generate. I think as much from what is now national highways, I nearly call them Highways England, they're national highways now, we're concerned about how that might potentially affect the junction. But they were eventually happy with the arrangements that were being put in place for travel planning across the entirety of the site. In terms of cycleways and footways, I'm not sure that this particular development on its own has any requirements. I'm pretty certain it doesn't. But I am aware that I do see on a daily basis people cycling to the industrial estate from the town because they feel safe and able to do it. So I think that's just an observation, really, Councillor Thackeray.
Can I just ask, from recollection, I can't remember if there is a footpath that extends on that side of the road as far as the entrance to this industrial estate.
I think the footpath from memory is largely on the opposite side of the road, and you go quite a long way down to around about where the, I nearly said the BMW garage, but I think it's probably the mini garage is where it goes to. But it carries on. I think there's a footway then outside of the Tara Park.
Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to raise the issue with regard to the outside space for the children. I do think that it needs to be larger than it is. It also needs to be very secure. This is a fairly open estate with lots of people coming in and out. We could have a safeguarding issue, and I'd like to make sure that those children are safe and secure.
I think the design of it is such that it can only be, well, firstly it's licensed, so you know, obviously in just meeting our standards, it's meeting other standards as well. But the essence of the area is that it's only accessed internally from the building, so there's no outer gates or things of that nature. But I would take your point that, you know, that when you actually tot up quite a number of children that could be in there, it does seem as though that there are possibilities to make that notional area bigger than is currently shown on that plan, as opposed to it just being laid over to, you know, landscaping, for example. That's not to say there isn't a need for landscaping, and this developer has done a decent job, I think, in terms of landscaping his units compared with the historical things that have been achieved on the historical part of York Road Industrial Estate. But it does seem to be incredibly popular. You know, now it's started taking off. It's becoming quite popular with a number of businesses.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, just picking up on what Councillor Goodrick said. I completely and utterly agree. From the plan that is in front of us, the area of outdoor space would appear to be wholly inadequate, and I would hate to think that we're going to approve this until that's rectified, quite frankly.
I mean, Chairman, from our perspective, I mean, we can make that area as big as it is sensible to make it, you know. But in terms of play areas required for nurseries, that is actually controlled through other legislation. So we may actually be applying a greater standard. I don't see that's necessarily an issue for us, but there will be a minimum requirement for the play area.
Are there any? Oh, Councillor Goodrick.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. So am I right in thinking that we are going to delegate this to you as the senior officer?
The purpose of the condition is to reserve the detail of that yes, in its essence. It's leaving it us to deal with that detail. As the report suggests, there are statutory regulations for nursery provision, I think was the word that Alan's used on page 81. But from our point of view, the area in front of them to the side of the building would appear to have more scope for an enlarged space.
Councillor Thackeray.
Thank you. Going back to footpaths, is it something that we can condition that the footpath be extended from wherever it ends, which might be at the turn to Ian Brown Tyres, or it might be further on, I can't remember, to give parents the opportunity to walk there without having to cross the road with 3 or 4 children in hand?
Well, we can only take our lead from the Highway Authority, Chairman. I mean, they've recommended a number of conditions, but that's the extent of what we've got. So what you've got is what the County Council is recommending to us.
Are there any more questions? Well, if there are no questions, I think it's Councillor Cleary's ward. Do you want to take any of those comments into account?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'm very pleased to say I'm also shared with Councillor Graham, that ward. Yes, given that there've been some concerns raised about what would other be a very, if not perfect, a very good scheme, given that we have delegated the matter of the outside space for the nursery to the planning department, I do propose that we approval of this site. As has been said, the units on this on the York Road industrial site as a whole are very popular and attracting a number of businesses. Also, it's worth saying that within the area, people move from businesses move from one site to other sites. So I think that is a sign of a successful economy in the area. Given the concerns that have been raised from the committee, I'm happy that it is the matter of the outside space will be delegated and will be dealt with, and I'm very happy to move approval. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Anybody? Well, do you have a seconder? Councillor Goodrick, do you wish to speak?
Sorry, Chairman, I'll second it without any further conversation. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? No, in that case, can we take the vote, please, Gary?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Andrews?
For, Chair.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Graham?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
That's 6 votes for and none against, Chairman. The application is approved.
Thank you. I'll now leave the room and hand over to Councillor Potter.
Right, we come on to agenda item 9, 21/00579/full. Change of use and alterations to the existing barn to form 15 number stables and storage rooms to provide 3 number stables for personal use and 12 stables for full livery service for horse owners and use of existing arena for external hire on up to 30 days per year. Over to you. Thanks, Neve.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. If we could just go to the aerial map, please. Yeah, so the description has just been read out. The application site is Steeners Farm, which is to the northeast of Little Barf, which is situated in the open countryside and accessed via Greenland Lane. And you can see Greenland Lane starts at the crossroads with the Kirby Misperton Road, and then goes northwards and terminates just at Greenland Cottage, which hopefully you can see just to the sort of upper left-hand part of the aerial image. The site extends to approximately 5.2 hectares and incorporates the main original farm dwelling, holiday accommodation and agricultural barn, which has been partly converted to 8 commercial livery stables and an equestrian arena, together with a number of fields under the same ownership. And just for reference, where you can see the barn notated, the existing livery stables are the sort of lighter grey element to the eastern part of that building, with the application site being the remainder of that building. If we could move to the first few photos. So this is the barn itself here, where the change of use is proposed, and the next photograph, and the next photograph. And then if we could just move to the 4th photograph, this is showing an internal view of the building at present. And as you're able to see, some internal works to provide the stables has already been undertaken, but none are occupied or in use, so therefore that's not in breach of any planning regulations. The next photograph shows the large area of hard standing available to the south of the building to accommodate car parking. And the next couple of photographs actually show the internal layout of the approved 8 stables to the eastern part of the application site. And the next one just shows that from a slightly different angle. The next photograph shows the arena that was approved as part of the 2019 application. The current application was originally submitted without reference to the use of this arena for external hire, which wasn't afforded by the grant of the previous application. Therefore, this was subsequently included within this current description and re-advertised, and it indicates that there would be a maximum number of 30 events annually. Furthermore, the agent has confirmed in a supporting statement on the 23rd of August the following, and I'll quote directly. It notes, upon request, I would be prepared to introduce a nightly curfew after 9 p.m. for the arena lights. The lights have not been used to date, and further, this would eliminate summer use. Arena hire has been very limited, and I anticipate the new stable will increase arena use, so that external hire will only take place on a very limited number of occasions, and further limited to 30 events annually. And just to clarify, it's noted that the existing lights have lawful permission with no specific hourly restriction as approved under the 2019 scheme. So this would present a method of control which isn't currently available to officers. It's further confirmed that the lights had only been used once at night time since their installation for a publicity photograph. So the next photograph is basically where Greenland Lane starts, and to the right hand side, you're probably familiar with this, but that's Kirby Misperton Road, so it's the junction where Greenland Lane begins. Greenland Lane is an unclassified road and runs northward from this point. So the next photographs are sort of progressing in a sort of northwards fashion. So the next photograph, sorry, I should have just said the previous photograph to the right hand side of that is actually Prospect Farm, and the next photograph is sort of progressing to the curve in the road, and the next photograph along. In this photograph you can see where the proposed passing place would be located, just at the sort of far curve at that point. The provision of a vehicular passing place has been proposed by the applicant to sort of provide adequate facilities should oncoming traffic meet. The next photograph is looking towards the passing place, but from a northwards point looking southerly, so you can appreciate the sort of corner part where that would be located. And the next photograph is looking northward to Greenland Cottage, which is the neighbour of the application site. It's located about 200 metres to the west of the barn to be converted. And the next photograph is looking southwards again from sort of closer to Greenland Lane, to Greenland Cottage. And the next photograph is a better view of that, and you can appreciate the sort of good landscaping around that property. The next photograph is the sort of unadopted private road from where Greenland Lane terminates eastwards towards the application site of Steeners Farm. And a public right-of-way actually runs along this track as well. So the next photograph is looking back towards Greenland Cottage. Sorry, it's hard to see. And the next one is looking eastwards towards Steeners Farm, and at the top of the hill you can see Prospect Farm, and you can kind of appreciate the fallen land levels to the north of Little Barf. The next photograph is taken sort of looking back towards Greenland Cottage, and the next one is taken from the arena itself, again looking back towards Greenland Cottage, and you can appreciate the sort of the distance of about 200 metres from these points. The last one is just showing the same view, but from sort of the car parking area to the south of the barn. So if we could just go back to the aerial photograph, that would be great. As part of this application, 4 letters of objection were received to the original scheme, and objections from both the Great and Little Barf Parish Council and Kirby Misperton Parish Council. As part of the revised scheme, including the pass in place, there were 3 letters of objection and 1 letter of objection from Great and Little Barf Parish Council, with no further response from Kirby Misperton Parish Council. In terms of the principle of the development, including the change of use of what is a redundant agricultural building for equine activity, it's considered that this is acceptable in accordance with policy SP9 of the Ryedale plan, as equine activity does make an important contribution within the district. Also, the proposed use of the arena on a limited basis of 30 days a year for outside hire is considered to be acceptable, and the Highways Officer was aware of this element in his assessment of the application. The actual change of use would require no external alterations and is therefore considered to be acceptable in terms of form and design, and would have no impact on the visual amenity of the locality. In terms of residential amenity, as you can see from the photographs and the aerial map, there are relatively limited properties in close proximity to the application site, with Greenland Cottage to the west being the closest. There would be no openings on the facing elevation of the barn itself. It's acknowledged that vehicles accessing the site would pass via other properties along Greenland Lane within the village, and also Greenland Cottage, but it's not considered that neighbouring residents would be likely to experience additional material harm in terms of noise, amenity impacts or disturbance as a result of this additional vehicular traffic or the stable use itself. And in particular, the proposed full livery service will help to reduce the potential level of journeys which could otherwise be associated with the development of this type. Also, the proposed restriction of the rental of the arena to 30 days a year is considered reasonable, and will ensure that remains ancillary to the main livery use, with hire undertaken only occasionally. Additionally, the existing barn already incorporates an unrestricted agricultural use, and other farm traffic is present along Greenland Lane within the village. It's also noted that vehicles travelling along this lane wouldn't be achieving particularly high speeds. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has also confirmed no objection to the proposal, and the proposal put forward by the applicant to limit the use of the outdoor lighting of the arena to a maximum time of 9 PM in the evening is strongly welcomed by the local planning authority and will be conditioned. The lighting wouldn't be necessary during summer months and will limit environmental and amenity impacts. In terms of access and highway safety, this proposal would relate to the 12 stables for hire for commercial purposes, and as noted, this would be run as a full livery service only, which does limit the number of daily trips that could otherwise occur with, for instance, a DIY style livery. As noted, the applicant has put forward a proposed pass in place to be constructed at their own expense at one of the bends on Greenland Lane, and that was considered and sort of concluded as their preferred way forward following a meeting with the North Yorkshire Highways officer on site. And following review of the revised plans that show that pass in place, the Highways officers confirmed they have no objection to the proposal in terms of access or highway safety, subject to condition. Therefore, they are content that this arrangement will be appropriate in terms of access and highway safety. So the concerns raised by the objectors are noted and are acknowledged, but it is considered that this approach of installing a formalised pass in place to the required standards will help to ensure good visibility and manoeuvring space. So just to conclude, the points raised by the third parties and the parish councils are noted and acknowledged. It's considered that the proposed pass in place will help to improve the situation, and it would do so to the point where the statutory consultee has no objections to the proposal. It's further considered it wouldn't have a materially adverse impact upon residential amenity, and there's no concerns in terms of form and character as a result of this proposed change of use. Thank you.
Thank you, Niamh. Right, I believe we have the applicant wishing to speak. Can you hear me, Mr. Seidel? Hello, Mr. Seidel. Can you hear me?
I don't have any submission from Mr. Seidel, so I don't know whether Niamh has anything. Hayley, do we know if Mr. Seidel is actually attendant at the meeting? I don't believe he's shared that with us. We do ask people to, if they're intending to speak, to share it with us, but I don't believe we have that.
Yes, apparently we can't hear Mr. Seidel, unfortunately, but he's left us a message to say everything that's been said that needs to be said. So thank you for that, Mr. Seidel. Right, in that case, we'll go on. Have we got any questions? I think Councillor Goodrick, you were the first on the button.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to raise in the conditions that there's no manure management plan, and with that number of stables, there could be a considerable amount of manure to deal with.
I did discuss this application with the Environmental Health Officer. I don't recall discussing that element specifically, but I think that's something that we could certainly add as a condition. I'm sure there'd be no issue with having that arranged. It is quite a distance from neighbouring residential properties, but I do appreciate with the increase in numbers, I'm sure that's something the applicant would be happy to provide.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just leading on from 2 questions. One is an observation, in fact that I'm pleased to see that you're looking into a manure management plan, even though it's mentioned in your report, Niamh, that it's some distance. Some people manage manure by burning, and smoke can travel some distance.
Yeah, I think there may be some separate legislation now that prevents it. I think under environmental protection legislation. It's something I can certainly discuss with the Environmental Health Officer.
Thanks. The other question is, you refer to a redundant building. Just looking at the photographs, the buildings looked pretty good buildings, and I just wondered how you defined and how you described them as redundant for agricultural purposes.
Well, I think not sort of redundant in the sense that they're falling down, or they are obviously in good condition, but I don't think they were being used for active sort of agricultural uses, to the best of my knowledge.
Any more questions? Okay, I think we'll move into debate. I think this is in Councillor Mason's patch, but as he's declined to attend, Councillor Thackeray, would you like to take them? Is it? Right. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I took a ride to test the road, and I've got a little bit of pothole envy, because most of the potholes on that little road have been filled in, unlike Broby. It's a narrow road. If people are too concerned about it, the People's Charter would say jump on the back of North Yorkshire highways and get them to mend the road and make it a better road. But apart from that, it's a narrow road, and there's clearly places where one would pull over and get past without going down the hole, I think. And if there is going to be a passing place, it'll be fine. It's not a racetrack, it's a single track road, but then again, it's like very many roads around where I live. You go gently down the road. When you get there at the bottom, it's a delightful environment, quite frankly, beautifully presented, and I think it'd be great.
Would you care to move approval?
Move approval.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
I can second approval. I think, yes, it certainly follows our rural land use policies. There's no extra building, no extra external detriment to the view, and as Councillor Thacker has already eloquently said, it's a delightful place down there.
Any more for any more? Yes, Councillor Goodrick.
Just happy to support, subject to the manure management plan.
Right, thank you. Yeah, just a comment from the chair. The only concern I had about this, like Councillor Thacker, is the appalling condition of the roads around there. In fact, I'd go so far as to say dangerous, because they're on one of my regular routes. But unfortunately, Highways North Yorkshire have no objections for some strange reason. So we don't have any grounds there. So can we go to the vote then, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a vote for the recommendation and the additional condition 6 requirement for a manure management plan. So Councillor Andrews clearly is not here. Councillor Cleary?
4.
Councillor Goodrick?
4.
Councillor Graham?
4.
Councillor Potter?
4.
Councillor Thackeray?
4.
Well, that's approved by 5 votes to 0, Chairman. Thank you.
So that brings us to item number 10, Chair. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Members, which is application number 21/00641/FUL at Swinton. It's the erection of 2 3-bedroomed detached dwellings with associated landscaping, parking and vehicular access. In its revised details to refusal 20/00898/FUL dated 15/12/2020. Land off West Street, Swinton, Norton. Would you like to speak to this, please, Niamh?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If we could just have the aerial map up to begin with, please. Great, thank you. So the application site is an open grassed area which lies within the development limits of Swinton to the northeast of the village. The site is located to the rear, to the west of dwellings fronting West Street and directly to the north of the Cherry Avenue cul-de-sac, directly adjoining the rear gardens of number 16 and 17 Cherry Avenue. The site is adjoined to the north by what appears to be undeveloped garden land associated with the adjoining residential property, and to the west lies agricultural land. So I will just go through some of the photographs, if that's okay. The first one is a view towards the site access from the east. And the next photograph is a view towards the north of West Street, and the next one is just towards the south. The next photograph is taken internally along the access, and the garage there is that associated with number 37 West Street. And I will come back to that a little bit later with some more clarification. The next photograph is a view looking back towards the entrance point along West Street, and the next photograph is actually within the sort of square part of the site itself, looking towards the stone boundary wall along the west of the site. The next photograph is taken from the southeastern corner of the site, and the next one is from the southwestern corner of the site. So you're really getting the sense of sort of the open grassed kind of nature of this application site. The next one is taken from the northwestern corner looking inwards, and the next one again is looking towards the eastern boundary of the site and the rear of the properties along West Street. The next photograph is towards the southern boundary of the site, and you can see the residential properties of 16 and 17 Cherry Avenue, and also again the garage associated with number 37 West Street. The next photograph is again just looking towards the properties at Cherry Avenue, and the next one is the rear amenity space of number 16. The next photograph is sort of taken back towards the application site from Cherry Avenue, and the next one, the last one, is another view of sort of broadly the application site, but again from Cherry Avenue. If we could just go back to the aerial map, that would be great, thank you. So as you'll have noted from the photos, the access is predominantly kind of completed with gravel, and Fairmount has a right of access to a garage and a single parking space directly in front of the garage. The description of the proposal has been read out, but the two properties that are proposed will be orientated with their principal elevations facing eastwards. Each would incorporate a pitch roof design with a projecting cross-wing element to the front. They would include a maximum ridge height of 8.075 metres. During the determination of this proposal, revised plans were received following discussion. The amendments were fully described in the officer's report, but briefly they included the two-storey development being further away from the boundaries of the properties along Cherry Avenue, amendments to the garage positions, improved materials to now include stone and clay pan tiles. Revised shadow drawings were submitted to accurately plot shadowing during the year, and alterations were made to the site layout to illustrate designated parking spaces and the tracking of a service vehicle also within the site. We have received 7 letters of objection, and following the submission of the revised plans, 1 further letter was received. The Parish Council have also objected, as you can appreciate from the report. In terms of principle, a Motherby and Swinton are considered to form a service village, and within service villages, infill development is supported. Whilst it might not be sort of traditional infill, it does have a direct access to West Street, and therefore isn't landlocked. Weight is also given to the fact that residential development has previously been approved within this site, and it's considered that there's no significant conflict with the requirements of policies SP1 or SP2 in principle. In terms of kind of character and form and impact, the application site presently has a sort of verdant, undeveloped character, and lastly appears to be used as a kitchen garden. In terms of layout, it's considered that this proposal is of a much lower density than the previously refused scheme and wouldn't result in the overdevelopment of the site. There is sufficient there is sufficient space around the dwellings, particularly to the front of the development, with private amenity spaces of an appropriate scale, and really that's welcomed in contrast to the previously refused scheme, which had a very cramped design. Furthermore, the revised schemes now have a more traditional scale with more appropriate proportions, including a 2-storey pitched roof form. The previous scheme incorporated a 3-storey asymmetrical mono-pitched roof, which included a maximum height of approximately 9.3 metres. The surrounding area, as you can appreciate from the photographs, is characterised by single and 2-storey dwellings, and therefore it's not considered that this would appear incongruous in scale. The use of clay roof tiles and stones considered acceptable, whereas the previously proposed stone cladding was considered inappropriate, but this would be subject to condition. Details of boundary treatment and landscaping will be considered during the discharge of conditions if members are minded to recommend approval. There was a point highlighted about the loss of the dry stone wall and some concern over the particular type of trees proposed, but the agents confirmed that they would be open to negotiate on these. A condition on lighting would also be recommended. Therefore, subject to those conditions, it's not considered that it would be detrimental to the wider landscape character of Swinton, given the now more traditionally designed dwellings, quality materials and landscaping. In terms of residential amenity, we have covered this in the report, but the previously proposed 4 dwellings would have incorporated a 3-storey asymmetrical mono-pitched roof form with a much higher maximum height. These, whenever they were proposed, were flush to the shared boundary with 16 and 17 Cherry Avenue to the south, and would have incorporated the building basically directly abutting their private rear amenity space. It was considered that that would have had an unacceptable impact in terms of daylighting and would have formed overbearing development and a harmful loss of outlook. But the present scheme would now be at a distance of approximately 12 metres from the rear of 17 Cherry Avenue, which is considered to be a sufficient distance where materially overbearing development or harmful loss of outlook would not be likely to occur. Nor is it considered that this would result in harmful overshadowing, which has been confirmed following receipt of the computer-generated shadow drawings undertaken throughout the year. It's also considered that there wouldn't be any material privacy issues, and there are appropriate conditions recommended. It's also considered that the 2 additional properties wouldn't be likely to generate undue levels of noise that would result in material harm to amenity. In terms of access and highway safety, the Highways Officer had requested plans to illustrate that large vehicles would be capable of manoeuvring within the site. They confirmed on the 8th of October this year that they had no objections in principle to the proposal. Conditions were recommended. Therefore, whilst there have been concerns raised about the suitability of the access, it's considered that this could be safely upgraded to the required standard. It's also considered that the proposed parking provision is acceptable and sufficient for the 2 3-bedroom dwellings with both external and internal spaces provided. As an additional note, further investigation has been undertaken into the rights of access and parking granted to 37 West Street, and the agent has confirmed in an email today the following. They've noted, "I can confirm that as part of our proposal, we intend to ensure that the objector," and that's the occupier of number 37, "maintains the right to access the car parking space as detailed on page 19, clause 6.1 of the title register document." And that registered document shows that there's a parking space and continued access to the garage as part of the sort of transfer of rights. However, this is a private matter and the local planning authority doesn't have jurisdiction to insist on this, but it is positive that the agent has confirmed on the above, and they have confirmed the applicant has confirmed that as well. So therefore it's considered that this proposal wouldn't impede the objector's rights over the application site. But ultimately, if the objector has concerns that this might breach their lawful right of access, they do have the ability to remedy this in private law outside of the planning process. It's also noted that the proposed connection to the foul sewer will be acceptable, and Yorkshire Water have recommended a condition. A condition will also be recommended to ensure that the proposed soakways and surface water discharge is provided to the satisfaction of an approved building control inspector. So to conclude, it's considered that the application is acceptable in terms of scale, form, materials, layout and design subject to condition. It's not considered this would result in harm to the character of the settlement, and it wouldn't result in adverse impacts upon neighbouring amenity in terms of loss of privacy or overshadowing or overbearing development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niamh. I understand there is a speaker, Mr. Dennis Girapniks. Are you there?
Chairman, I don't think the speaker's actually logged on to the meeting at all. It's not a question of he can't hear or we can't hear him, he's just not logged on to the meeting, but he has sent us some very brief comments, so I think it's probably helpful if Niamh reads those out as best she can. But I think it sort of covers what essentially Niamh just reported to you.
Yes, please, could you read them out?
Yes, of course, thank you, Chair. Yes, the occupier of number 37 has noted that their family's sort of most great concerns are that the new drawings that were consulted upon don't show the parking space which was granted by the landowner, and that it's just marked on that there's pen that there's access to the garage, so not actually showing in addition to the garage that the rights of access granted by the land registry document also show an additional parking space. And they've noted that it should be a marked parking space for one car. They've raised the point of how will they guarantee the access to their property when building will be started in terms of the shared driveway. They've noted that they would like a letter from the building company to confirm and guarantee full access to our property and parking space without any excuses. Yeah, so just to sort of come back to that point, the email I've had from the agent today, and I believe I did read it out, but I'll just mention it again. They did say, I can confirm that as part of our proposal, we intend to ensure that the objector maintains the right to access the car parking space detailed on the title register document. The plans themselves had already confirmed that the access to the garage would be secured, but this email just covers, in addition to the garage, the actual car parking space itself. And really this is sort of a private matter between the two parties rather than a matter in which planning has jurisdiction over. But I do feel that there has been that sort of correspondence to confirm that hopefully that will be suitably addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niamh. Are there any questions? No questions? Councillor Thackeray.
It's not a very, very serious question, but I wonder where the wheelie bins are going to be stored, because there's 6 wheelie bins rearing their heads on lots of these drawings, right under the kitchen window by the look of it. Is there a wheelie bin storage area, do we know?
Yeah, what appears to be wheelie bins do look like they are being stored sort of to the front of the dwelling, but both dwellings incorporate quite sizable rear amenity spaces that are connected by alleys, so I think any kind of future occupiers would have a bit of kind of, well, various possibilities on where they would like to put them. I'd probably put them to the back, to be fair. Thank you.
I think probably somebody just likes playing with their computer images.
Any more questions? Councillor Mason isn't here, so who would like to start this? Don't all shout at once. Councillor Cleary.
Just to save your breath, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think apparently the previous scheme was somewhat overdeveloped. I think these are quite generous in size. I'm pleased to see that they did address some of the previous objections, although apparently we have to note the existing objections. The report shows quite properly how they're acceptable. I have nothing much more to add, so I propose approval as per the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Thackeray, one question.
Are the chimneys real?
Well, they'll definitely be there.
Would you like me to clarify that question? Are they chimneys that will be functioning, or are they dummy chimneys? In other words, are they going to be open fires? Because I had a letter from an eminent member of my constituency recommending that this council never again recommend the fitting of a dummy chimney, that the council recommends a solar panel instead.
The floor plans do show internal chimneys on the rooms, so I would suggest they are functioning.
Maybe the architects could draw a little bit of smoke coming out of the chimneys, maybe.
We'll try and negotiate that next time, Councillor Thackeray.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I was quite astounded at the development in Thorntondale when I was passing that on a regular basis, and I saw the chimneys stacked up on pallets outside because I'd never seen them before. It came as quite a surprise. Yeah. Back to the matter in hand. I know there's always a lot of opposition to development anywhere, but I do find this quite heartening to see a couple of houses being built in one of the smaller villages, because we can't have them pickled in aspic. There's got to be some sort of development for future residents, and as I can see no earthly reason why we would refuse this, I will second approval. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cleary, you wanted to speak again?
Well, yes, with your permission, and it's really a point of observation and information, if I may, in respect of chimneys and chimney breasts. These are quite generous buildings. I suspect that from personal experience, the smaller the property, you might put a chimney on for appearances. The building regs in terms of getting the fireplace and hearth in a small living room is prohibitive, and therefore the smaller properties often don't have real fireplaces. In your phrase, they're false or fake or whatever. I suspect these are real because they're quite generous buildings, but it's a point of observation in my opinion.
I'd like to say something. I mean, I agree with Councillor Potter, comments about building in the villages. It is actually a service village, of course, but I have concerns about Swinton because I pass it quite regularly, and I go down there quite regularly, and it is very, very crammed, and the access roads are very narrow, and I really do question whether it's a good idea to have more development down there. But on the other hand, this site is actually quite big from what I can see, so the development itself is not cramped. So I will support it, but I feel very uncomfortable with adding more development to Swinton, even though it is a service village, and even though I do think that we need to see more houses in country villages. If nobody else wishes to speak, we will go to the vote. So would you like to take the vote, please, Gary?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Cleary.
4.
Councillor Goodrick.
4.
Councillor Graham.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Thackeray.
4.
That's approved by 6 votes to 0, Chairman.
Thank you. We now go to agenda item 11, which is number 21-00861 FUL and Thornton the Clay. It's a change of use of the public house to form one number 5-bedroom dwelling house, alterations to the rear window, configurations, erection of porch to front elevation and erection of 3-bay domestic garage with soft landscaping to front. Part retrospective. And the location is the White Swan, Low Street, Thornton, the Clay. It's Jill's case, is it?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, would you like to make your presentation, please?
Thank you, yes. Chairman, this is, you've described the application. You have a detailed report which outlines all of the issues and with all of the relevant information appended. In summary, it's the view of officers that the application is in clear conflict with policy SP11 of the development plan, which seeks to protect community facilities, and that this conflict is not outweighed by other considerations. Could we just have a look at some of the photos, please? So I don't know how familiar members are with Thornton-le-Clay, but that is the building there that you can see, the brick building, and attached to the side the other section of it that's painted in the cream paint. So it's on Low Street at Thornton-le-Clay, and the way that road is pointing, that's effectively, if I was to drive down that road, that would take me towards Flaxton. So that's the public house building there that you can see. The garden area behind the light fence is the garden area that's described, the landscaped area that's described in the application. That is the retrospective element of the application. And just to say that the small porch to the front elevation of the property, which forms part of the application, is the porch to that very dark grey main central door on that main principal elevation. If you can just move to the next picture, please. It's just another picture showing the public house building in the context of the wider street scene. You can just move to the next picture, please. That's just again another image of the building in the street scene. Move on to the next slide, please. This is just a picture, again, taken from the front, but just to give members a sort of an understanding of the close proximity between the pub and the village hall at the settlement. Thank you. If we could just move on to the next one. This is just a picture taken from the back of the property, the garden area. So you'll just see the trampoline on the left-hand side of the photograph. So the area where that trampoline is broadly the location for the proposed garage building. And then you can just see the outline, the outline of the grass around the hard standing area. So there's effectively a wall proposed, a garden wall proposed, that would segregate the garage building, the hard standing car parking area, and the sort of more informal garden space to beyond that. So effectively where I'm standing in the picture. You just see where the scaffolding is, that there's an extension to the building. It's the elevation of that section of the building, which there is the proposed changes to fenestration detailing. So the addition of 2 sets of patio doors on the ground floor level, and sort of feature floor to ceiling gable windows in the first floor. We'll just move on to the next photograph, please. And that's just taken from towards the back of the garden, looking back up towards the property. Just on the right-hand side there is certainly when this photograph was taken, the beginnings of I think, as I understand it, the excavation for a pond. That's referred to in the report. And I think that's probably the end of the photographs. Yeah, thank you. Chairman, there are just a couple of updates. In the late pages that accompany this report, there is a letter of objection from York Camera, the York campaign for Ryedale, which I'll just draw members' attention to. And also, just to make you aware that I was contacted by Councillor Hope this afternoon, the local ward member. He's just asked me to make members of the committee aware of his position, which is that he is fully in support of the officer recommendation. Chairman, I'm conscious that there are a number of speakers on this item and I don't really want to intrude on their time. It's just suffice to say at this point that the recommendation is one of refusal for the reasons outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the first speaker is the Councillor Paul Reddy from Foston and Thornton le Clay Parish Council. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Would you like to speak, please? You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, lovely. First of all, good evening. I believe we should I believe we should ask a question. If a village pub is just a place that gives people access to alcohol, then should we fight to keep it open? Because I think we would say no. But if a village pub is rooted in an area, responding to the local needs and expectations, delivering positive social, economical and environmental benefits to the whole community, then isn't this something that we would fight to keep? But of course, a business can only be a business if it is viable. To support this, the Ryedale Local Plan SP11 note 3 criteria for change of use: that there is no longer a need, or that suitable alternatives exist, or that there is no longer viability. No longer a need. Let's consider well-being. The Office of National Statistics state the need for contact is an innate human need in the same way that you feel hungry or tired. And as the UK's population rapidly ages, the issue of acute loneliness and social isolation is one of the biggest challenges that face our society. In a rural environment, the village pub has a vital role to play in helping people avoid loneliness. Suitable alternatives, as evidenced by the community group, we can accept that pubs offering the same combination of services do not exist in this area. It's also worth noting that the White Swan has strong ties and offers a combination of services to the village hall and the village school. Viability. The White Swan has been a viable business for over 150 years and was only closed when instructed by the government as part of the pandemic. White Swan was not only an employer for the local area, it also benefited financially from the growing number of holiday lets in the area and from the many tourists. As a village, we have seen the need to extend the school, and the village hall is attracting more events. It is a thriving village. Representing the people of the parish, in a public meeting, they unanimously requested the White Swan be registered as an ACV, which was then approved by this council in August of this year. It is clear the White Swan is a viable business that offers far more than just alcohol to the community. It is a place for people to meet, a place to dine, a place to socialise with those individuals who would otherwise be lonely, and an extension to other businesses and services in the area. I believe it's our responsibility to ensure all village pubs like this and like the Swan are protected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person who wishes to speak is David Johnson. David Johnson, are you there?
I am indeed.
Would you like to hear me? We can hear you. Would you like to speak, please? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the Save Our Swan group. We're people with very diverse experience and skills, but we are drawn together by a common aim to save our pub. This has not been a knee-jerk, every village deserves its pub reaction. We've conducted this campaign in what we believe to be responsible, research-led and resolute manner, and we will continue. We've all read and digested the detailed technical planning analysis in the planning department report. We've also had the open source material on the importance of tourism to Ryedale, the need for local employment, and the support for the well-being of rural communities. The White Swan has played its part in all of these. I'd like to focus on some of the more human and psychological aspects of this campaign and the effect that this change of use will have on the community and the future of the village and the surrounding area. Ours has always been a welcoming and supportive community, but this current situation has given further impetus to that characteristic. For many of us, the White Swan has become a cause of pride and provided a sense of our pub our village. Over the past months, we've all dwelt on the viability of the White Swan. Let's just think for a moment about the viability of our community and the impact that the destruction of the pub would have on its success and future prosperity. The symbiotic nature of the pub, the village hall and the school has been mentioned, but to reinforce the point, if the pub goes, the village hall will suffer, despite the ability and the efforts of the volunteers and the management team. Issues that range from much depleted car parking to the reduction of the invaluable mix of organised and planning functions with the spontaneity of what a pub can offer. They are different but mutually supporting. If the pub goes and the village hall suffers, then the school will suffer. Younger generation couples with young children will be drawn to a village which offers a good primary education, a vibrant and multi-generational community, and fun. We've all seen sad, decaying dormitory villages, little life, its inhabitants seeking their pleasure and entertainment elsewhere, and most likely an aging population with little, if any, new blood coming in. Well, we don't want that for our village, and maintaining the White Swan as a lively and welcoming pub will be absolutely key to avoiding that fate. COVID has taught us much. The isolation, the reduction in people's horizons,
Can you
the
wind up,
limitations.
please? You've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you. The limitations on social interaction, the problems of mobility, and a disappointment not being able to meet in an unplanned fashion. However, our solid foundations of the White Swan, Village Hall, and successful school will be fundamental in helping to rectify this. Against this backdrop, I suggest to allow this application to go through would be tantamount to an act of social vandalism. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the agent, Richard Harrison. Are you there?
Yes, hello, good evening. I'm actually the owner rather than the agent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and councillors. It's always disappointing to close a business. However, a public house, like any other business, needs to be viable to survive. In this particular case, we did not buy a business nor a viable serviceable public house. We bought an empty building with literally nothing in it and in need of some significant repair. Our renovations so far have put right many issues that would not have lasted much longer unless, if left unchecked, all with building control approval. The withdrawn planning application referred to in the officer's report was to reinstate the version of the White Swan from the past. Florets were recommended as a leading consultant by Ryedale Planning. The resulting report is written from a general business perspective and is the considered advice of this national hospitality trade consultancy firm, and would be given the same had it been commissioned by the council. In fact, as was the case with the Royal Oak in Nunnington. I need to point out that the planning report is misleading in this area at the top of page 4, where it says that the current application has been submitted following viability work which confirmed that the public bar space included within the withdrawn application would not be a viable proposition. This is not true. The Florets report is clear and it examines the viability of the reinstatement of the same business that was running prior to our purchase and not based on our withdrawn planning application. Therefore, this application has 100% been guided by the fact that Florets stated that any public house business operating on this site has a high risk of business failure based on the facts laid out in the report. Clearly, Ryedale have decided to side with a different view taken by the Hughes report. Hughes removes all setup costs and simply assumes that in the right hands the business should be viable. If that's the basis for agreeing with them, we ignore all facts, figures, business analysis, and simply that life on the assumption that everything will work in the right hands. My concern is that you're being led to believe that the White Swan is required on the pretense that some people think it could be viable and a small number of households in the Canberra recommended 1,200 metre walking distance may want to use it from time to time, when industry experts clearly think that it will not work. We are simply taking expert business advice on board in applying for this change of use. In reality, Thornton-le-Clay is a pub. In Thornton-le-Clay, the pub has been closed for 19 months, admittedly most of the time due to COVID. But now venues are open again, it's not really being missed. Those who want a pint and a chat and socialisation are using the Thompson's Arms, another local village pub. The village hall is doing really well, and people are actually using it again. Thank you. Quiz nights, indoor bowling, bands arranged, and coffee mornings happening, where before the pub may have been used for these activities, the village hall would have been left empty, struggling to pay for heating oil. The heart of the village community in Thornton-le-Clay is the people, I agree, not the pub. If anything, this whole process has made the community stronger without an open pub at its centre. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to have to ask the officers to come back on some of those comments.
Yes, Chair.
But before I do, can I just confirm, please, that there are no other speakers?
I don't believe there are, Chairman, no.
Well, could you come back on those comments, please?
Certainly, there are a couple of comments that I would like to come back on. I think Mr Harrison said that we recommended florets to him. That is not the case. I spoke to his agent, and I remember the telephone call where his agent asked if I could recommend any advisors, any companies that specialised in public house viability assessment. I said that I wasn't in a position to recommend anybody in particular, but I did give him some names of companies that I knew were specialists in the field, so it wasn't recommended. In terms of the point about the previous withdrawn application, I've just literally taken the comment around that that application and the bar space that was included in that as not being viable, because I think that is something which is referred to in the applicant's own design and access statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. We now come to questions. I think I'll start by asking the question. Has there been a marketing exercise to test the market, or are we just relying on consultants' reports?
The pub was marketed. It was put on the market for sale, but it was marketed by a residential estate agent and was subsequently bought by the applicant. So effectively, when the applicant bought it, it was taken off the market.
So it wasn't tested on the specialist market that is usually that one would normally put pubs and hotels and things on then?
No, that's correct.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, it's not a question. I'm just assuming we're going into debate.
In that case, if there are no other questions, we will go into a debate. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Right, first of all, I'd like to thank Jill for a very well-considered report, and not least the recommendation, because at the start of this I had a horrible feeling we were heading off down the Nunnington Road again. I'd also like to congratulate the community on a concerted effort to save their pub, including the asset of community value, because I have to say that's the most letters and communications I have ever received on a single application. Looking at one side of the argument, approval of this application would probably significantly increase the value of the property, but of course that would only be a positive for the applicant. Then looking at the supporting comments on page 167 of the agenda, I felt I needed to comment myself on some of these, because there's one of them, this is a positive scheme that enhances the community, and I sort of scratched my head and thought, how so? Closing a rare community facility, enhancing the community. There was the family actively contributes to community life, and I was wondering exactly how. No financial accounts were made available to the applicants when they bought it, so why buy it if you've got no financial accounts? If the business was profitable, a 30% rent increase should not have been a problem. I can't comment any further on that one. It's unreasonable to expect a business to meet a community need. To my knowledge, every pub, restaurant, cafe, shop, etc., meet a community need, albeit that is for profit and a livelihood. But those are distinctly community needs. Change the use before anyone else loses their life savings. And I had to wonder why somebody would purchase a business with their life savings without first confirming the viability and profitability, but then closing the business, albeit it was actually closed because of COVID, but notwithstanding. Generally, I mean, there's a positive, there's clear support for this community facility with the ACV and the responses from the village. As I said before, I've never seen so many against one application, and I believe that sends a clear message. On to page 170 at the bottom, where it says the previous tenant offered to purchase the White Swan at a price significantly in excess of the valuation adopted by Florets. This demonstrates confidence in the viability of the White Swan as a profitable business. So I'm rather confused in why, therefore, do Florets assess the business as unviable, and why was this offer refused? So I shall just leave that one with you. But in view of the whole of the report and my personal view, this business was clearly viable before it was closed for COVID. I'm quite happy to support the officer's recommendation and move that for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cleary, are you going to second that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will indeed. I'd like to add to my colleague and friend's comments as well. Clearly, there's been a lot of objections. However, we have to look at the material planning reasons for deciding this, for determining this application. In doing so, we have to look at the report that the report from Hughes that questions the finances. You've got to use a willing and sensible, reasonable figures in getting to your profitability figure. And clearly, using the reasonable figures, they come to a conclusion that it is viable. Mr. Chairman, we have to remind ourselves of two very basic planning training or planning behaviours that we have to submit to. The first is that we have to ignore the fact that it's a retrospective application. The second is to remember that we're looking at the application, not the applicant. We're looking at the property. As one of the reports says, the property is the test of viability, not the owner or the applicant. So we look at, although we don't ignore the multitude of objections to this application, we look at the material planning reasons, and clearly, as the officer has said, and in the report and the recommendation, it is clearly, I think you opened your report by saying it's clearly against our policy. This is not a balanced application. It is clearly, the policies are clearly against this application. I second the motion for refusal. I second the motion to follow officer's recommendation, and I will be voting against this application for the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Thackeray.
Yeah. Very, very difficult, I find these applications, and sadly I suspect that whatever happens tonight, it probably won't be the last time that we're looking at it. But there is an underlying issue, and it was mentioned earlier by our colleague Councillor Potter about preserving villages in Aspic. The appraisal says it is clear from some of the points made in objections from members of the local community to the proposal that the pub is considered to contribute to the vitality of the village. and the well-being of the local community, valued by members of the local community. Norton members had the pub listed as members of the village, I should say, had the pub listed as an asset of community value. It's also of note that members of the community see the pub as having a symbiotic relationship with other community facilities, that its presence has directly helped to support the village hall indirectly and indirectly the school. I think I'll be right in saying that this village is classed as an other village. Would I be right in saying that? Therefore, there is little chance with the current Ryedale plan that there can be an increase in residents of this village that would help support a vital, contribute to the vitality of the village. And I think this is a great conflict whereby we want village facilities to thrive, we want local businesses to thrive, and yet we refuse permission for new life, new blood to come into these places to support these facilities. So I think the entire policy is conflicting with the desire for enhanced vitality, vibrant local communities, I'm sorry to say.
Councillor Goodrick.
I hear what my colleague says with regard to the vitality of villages, but I do think there's been some recent house building in Thornton Clay, and I'd also come back to the suggestion that there are other pubs in the area. Well, I'm not aware that the Thompson's Arms, which is in Flaxton, serves food. The Blacksmith's Arms in Flaxton is closed, not serving food. The nearest place that serves food, I believe, may be Welburn, the Crown and Cushion at Welburn, Sheriff Hutton, or even Tykes, which is not a pub, it is a restaurant with a bar facility. So this is a really difficult one because the community have had this pub for over 100 years and it was well supported, it did do a good food offer, it was a successful business. And I've said this before, pubs rely on the landlord and landlady being successful business people, and there are plenty out there that would wish to take this on and run it as a pub. So I will go with the officer recommendation. I'm very pleased and delighted with the report that's come from officers, and I will support their recommendations.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Well, in that case, I'll put my tuppenny worth in it. We've all been received a lot of correspondence from the objectors, and one of those, which particularly impressed me, was a letter from a young girl who I think it's the school. I think it was at school, and she's worked there as a waitress, and and it's been an opportunity for, if you like, local youth employment, and for that person to enter the world of work. And I know that a lot of pubs employ very young students to act as waitresses and do other work in these pubs. And I think it's an excellent way of introducing them to the world of work. And I think that the more of these places that are open, the better. That is only one of many reasons why I would support this. All credit to that lady. I think this is an excellent report. I commend it, and I will be supporting it. Thank you. Now, does anybody else wish to say anything? In that case, we'll go to the vote. Would you take the vote, please, Gary?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the vote to refuse the application as recommended. Councillor Andrews?
For the recommendation.
Councillor Cleary?
For refusal.
Councillor Goodrick?
For refusal.
Councillor Graham?
For refusal.
Councillor Potter?
For.
And Councillor Thackeray?
For.
So the application is refused by 6 votes to 0, Chairman.
Thank you. The next application, in fact, there's 2 applications on 6 Langton Road. Can I ask the officers if it would be appropriate to take both together, or do we need to take both separately?
We do need to take 2 votes, Chairman, but I think one presentation will cover both aspects, I think.
Right, well, that is fine then. This is item number 21, I believe, 01059 house. It's a householder application for the erection of a flat-roofed single-storey extension to rear with roof, lantern and single-storey extension to garage to form a home office at 6 Langton Road, Norton, Morton. As 6 Langton Road is a listed building, there has to be 2 applications, one a planning application and one a listed building application. So we'll have a single presentation and then perhaps deal with everything together, but at the end we'll need 2 separate votes. So who's dealing with this?
Yes, I have the honour of being delegated upwards again, Chairman.
Thank you.
These 2 applications, in fact, the final application is also Emma's as well, which I have the joy of. But yes, Chairman, this application and the application for listed building consent relate to number 6 Langton Road, both relating to a property, a 3-storey property, terrace property, very imposing property, but actually all of the alterations are around the back, so they're sort of only partly visible from St Nicholas Street and Paddock Close. But if members are able to look at page 311 on the agenda papers, what you'll see there is essentially the outline at the top of page 311 of the main building. As you see, it's a 3-storey building with a hip roof, quite distinctive properties as you'll see from the photos. And these also have a quite a distinctive 2-storey outshut at the back, which projects to the rear. And the proposed extension, the flat-roofed, parapeted roofed extension sits in between the 2 projections that come forward both on this property and the neighbouring one, very well screened. And also at the back of the property, there are 2 of the dwellings have a garage at the end of their gardens, and the other element of the scheme is for a small extension to provide an office facility within the furthest end of the garden. And the reason the application is before you on the agenda is that the parish council, whilst not objecting in principle to the extension, had actually objected to the detail of the design of the what I'll call the flat-roofed extension, which is immediately at the rear of the house, which you'll note that the conservation officer is happy with in detail. So I think if we can just quickly go to the photographs, this is the front elevation, and they all look like this, very distinctive, very attractive period properties. The 2 at the ends of this 3-storey terrace have a hip slated roof, so it's a very distinctive property. And you can't see any of the development from that view. So if we quickly go through to the back, this run of properties, this view is taken actually not from the road, but from an internal access way that runs between the properties. So they've almost got like a split rear garden. And as you can see, they've all got this distinctive 2-storey outshut at the rear. And the proposed extension, you wouldn't see even from this view, because it's obscured totally by the red brick 2-storey additions. So just go to the next photo. This is actually looking square into the back of the property. So that's where the parapeted extension would just sit, coming out from the sash window, almost as far as the projection of the red brick 2-storey addition. So just take the next photograph. This is looking back down the garden, so you're looking at the other side of the sort of access way to the far end of the garden, and that's the back of the garage, which would have the small office extension, which has got the gabled feature that you can see on the agenda papers. And you can see there that the neighbour also has a garage. So when you look to I'll show you the photographs in a moment from Paddock Close, you can't see the back of the properties. So So go to the next photograph, please. And this is the first photograph from, actually this is stood in St Nicholas Street, looking at the junction of Paddock Close. And the garage there that you see is the door of the garage that you were just seeing the back of. The single-storey addition at the back of the garage, you would just catch a glimpse of the roof there behind that planting. And if you take to the next photo, this is a view from further down Paddock Close looking back. And as you can see here, that you can see both garages from this view. But as you can see and appreciate, the back of the properties themselves, the principal buildings, is set quite a significant distance back. They're very long curtilages, so in terms of public view of this, you wouldn't get any view of the extension to the house itself at all. So hopefully, I think that's the last photograph, so hopefully that gives you a feel for the context. And as I say, the council's building conservation officer is happy with the design approach, and so therefore we recommend approval.
Could you just point out the thing which the parish council are actually objecting to?
If we can just go back to the third photograph, I think it is. It's the parapeted extension that is to the side and rear of the property. So it sits in the L of the back of the principal house and the red brick extension. It nestles in that area.
Right, thank you. Is there a speaker from the parish council?
There are no speakers on these two items, Chairman.
Because you've just got a link to the parish council on this note as I've got. Well, in that case, can we move on to questions? Do members have any questions? In that case, we move for the debate, and I think we have the debate, and then we have two votes at the end of the debate. I suppose I'm the nearest. The member is nearest to Norton. I don't think I need to say any more. I think I'll just propose the motion, propose the officer's recommendation. Does anybody wish to second that?
I will second that, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody wish to speak to that? Well, this is an easy one. Right, in that case we have to have two votes. First of all, for the planning application, and then there's the second one for the listed building application. So, Gary, can we have two votes, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I shan't labour the point. Item 12, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Cleary.
4.
Councillor Goodrick.
4.
Councillor Graham.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Thackeray.
4.
The planning application is approved by 6 votes to 0. Quickly moving on, item 13 for the listed building consent. Councillor Andrews.
4.
Councillor Cleary.
4.
Councillor Goodrick.
4.
Councillor Graham.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Thackeray.
4.
And that too is approved by 6 votes to 0, Chairman.
Thank you, Gary. We'll now go on to item number 14 on the agenda, which is application number 2101-094, House Oswaldkirk Parish Meeting, and it's for the erection of a first floor extension over existing single-storey ground floor projection at 4 the Terrace, Oswaldkirk, Helmsley. are you dealing with this one as well?
I am, Chairman. I'm conscious that we've got two speakers on this application, or I hope we still have, one of which is a supporter and the other one who's an agent. As you noted from the application papers, that we have received some third-party objections to this application, and also there were some comments and concerns submitted during the processing of the application. Obviously, you'll have picked up that there's been a series of amendments to the plans over the processing of it, but in essence, the gist of the objection is not, I don't think, to the principle of the extension, but to actually the detail of the design of it. And with particular regard to a part of the first floor extension on the western end, which actually is the detail of which is gable onto the road, which is the terrace. The terrace, for those of you who know Oswaldkirk well, is effectively almost a cul-de-sac. It does peter out to serve a single farm at its eastern extent, but it's the small road that runs west to east. And if you're heading from through the village from the York direction, it's just before you come to the steep hill to go up to the B road, as if you're heading to Helmsley, and the photographs will show that in a moment. So without further ado, if we can just go to the first photograph. This is these properties are located on the south side of the terrace, which for anybody who knows the terrace will appreciate that properties on the northern side of the terrace are located on the hillside, so they're on a much higher level. Then you've got the terrace, and then the properties, and there are far fewer properties on the south side, are then at a much lower level. And hopefully members will have appreciated that from the sectional drawings that are in the agenda papers. So this is looking at the property in question. As you'll see, it's a semi-detached property. It has already historically had an extension to the side in the past at ground floor level, and as you can see, that it projects a reasonable amount to the side. In essence, the proposal proposes, in terms of what you're looking at there, which is a slightly subordinate two-storey link at first floor level, so it's below the level of the main roof, and then the two-storey bit right at the end turns through 90 degrees, so it's got a subordinate gable, but gable onto the road, and that appears to have been a cause of much of the concerns and objections we've received. So we can take the next photograph, please. So this is just a view of looking down. There are two pairs of properties at this point, which is towards the eastern end of the terrace. And the next photograph, please. This is looking back the other way, so the other side hasn't been as extended. And the next photograph, please. And this is just looking at another property. So you get an idea of how properties drop down on the southern side of the terrace. If you can take the next photograph, please. So this is looking back the other way from the other pair. So again, you get the feeling that actually there is a predominance of buildings that have got their ridge parallel to the road in terms of these two pairs. Okay. The next photographs then give you examples, sorry, the next photograph after this, then give you examples of other buildings in the vicinity. So this is looking up from the driveway towards the north side of the terrace. So you really get an impression of how they're sort of overlooked, and you're looking at, if you own one of those properties, you're looking way over south in the York direction. And the next photograph, please. So this is back west, again south side of the terrace, but you'll see these pairs have got gables facing the road. So although there's a predominance of properties that are ridge parallel to the road, either side of the terrace, there are examples of others that have got quite prominent gables. So here you've got a pair of properties that have got actually bigger gables than what are proposed on this proposed extension. The next photograph, please. And this is a view that you're probably all familiar with, dropping down to second or whatever it is to go up the hill. But here again, you can see the character of the buildings. You can see the character of the buildings in the vicinity, quite a variety of characteristics. But again, buildings of varying ages and styles, but with gable features that are prominent on the front elevations. So take the next photograph, please. And this is a view looking at the back of one of the properties on the terrace. So you can see that there are, wherever you look through the village, there are examples of gable features on dwellings. So if we just go on again, I think, again, this is a view looking down the terrace, just to really give you a feel for the difference in levels. So again, you've got a glimpse on the right-hand side of the pair of cottages that have got the prominent gable, and then moving up in terms of levels to the road level, and then the properties on the opposite side at a higher level. But again, even those have got gable features in some of the roofs. I'm not sure if that's the last photograph. No, this is another one back at the entrance. So this is looking at the entrance to the terrace, and again, you can see on the lower level there that there are a number of properties that are with gable features. And I think that might be the last photograph. Yeah, that's it. In essence, Chairman, the comments are really, to my mind, more about the detail of the design approach that we're being asked to consider. The site is in the conservation area, so it's one that's been looked at in great detail by the Council's conservation officer. But I hope that members can appreciate from the description on page 343 that and the pictures on page 343 that actually it's the single-storey element that has got the subordinate two-storey elements, but a part of it's got the gable feature facing the road that appears to have generated so much concern. But I think officers are happy with it given its context.
Thank you, Gary. We now have two speakers. First of all, Helen Goodman. Are you there, Helen?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. You have 3 minutes, Helen.
I'm only going to take half a minute. Good evening, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of Mandy Theobald and David and Helen Goodman. I think the planning officer has done a very thorough appraisal of the planning application for number 4, the terrace. The modified new plan would make a very attractive house, which would be a pleasant addition to the already varied houses on the terrace in Oswaldkirk. We support the council in their view of approving this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have the agent, Christopher Jones. Are you there, Christopher?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I feel it might be worth expanding on a few points within the officer's report and comments for completeness. Now, I've worked successfully in some of the most refined heritage sites, such as the Yorkshire Sculpture Park and the World Heritage Site in Belper, just to name 2. But based on my experience, I can proudly say I agree with the case officer that the proposal preserves the conservation area. It's sympathetic to the hearse dwelling and conserves the area of outstanding natural beauty. We have worked to address the concerns shared in regards to the amount of glazing made by the AONB manager, which have now been addressed. The concerns over development by some members of the public, we don't feel are substantiated with reasonable justification. I can confidently say overdevelopment does not play a part here for the following reasons. The development uses the existing footprint of the building. The site is twice the size of the neighbouring site to the east, and as such the ratio of land to building footprint is significantly reduced. The size is also larger than the neighbouring site to the west, whose buildings have comparable mass and roof pitches which turn 90 degrees, exactly like the proposal, as you've seen in the photographs just now. There is no loss of view, no light, or no overshadowing as a result of the proposal. The proposal is fully supported by contextual references around the street, as well as considered and proportionate, as noted by the officer in her report. With this said, I would like to thank the officer for her collaboration and feedback during both the pre-planning and main application. It's safe to say we all recognise the importance of a respectful proposal from the beginning, hence the need to engage with officers from the start, which I strongly believe is the correct way to do it. During the pre-application, we discussed and tabled a few options along with the applicant's aspirations and the reasoning behind these aspirations. With the help of the officer, the applicants compromised considerably on what they originally wanted, but we all agreed it was for the overall benefit of the site. Following this process, we submitted the revised scheme in which we felt is respectful and in keeping with the area. Additional changes were made during the application in a bid to ease concerns from those who were not part of the initial process, involving lowering the height further and reducing the glazing further. We have followed the correct process due diligently and trust the committee will share our willingness and appreciation for the development. This application is very important to the family, as without a bathroom or a space for the growing family renders it unlivable. I hope you look favourably on the application, and I thank you for allowing me to speak to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Do I have a proposal then? Councillor Goodrick.
Chairman, I'll propose that we go with the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Goodrick. Councillor Cleary.
I will second that proposal.
So the motion is, so the recommendation is proposed and seconded. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak?
I would just like to speak as the ward member.
Councillor Thackeray.
Thank you. Yes, I support the recommendation. Thank you.
If nobody else wishes to speak, can we go to the votes, please? Can we take the vote, please, Gary?
We can, and so this is the officer recommendation of approval. Councillor Andrews.
For.
Councillor Cleary.
For.
Councillor Goodrick.
For.
Councillor Graham.
For.
Councillor Potter. For. Councillor Thackeray.
For.
So the application stands approved by 6 votes to 0. Thank you.
There was just one point that I think we missed in regard to agenda item 11, which was the pub members, and that was the enforcement action. There is a note at the bottom of the report which says that there will be a report to the next meeting of this committee dealing with whether or not we should take enforcement and how that enforcement should be taken. Do you wish to speak to this, Gary, before I close the meeting?
Chairman, if I could just update you on that. Yes, when the report was written, we were awaiting some legal advice around whether about potential enforcement action, and that was going to be the subject of a report to the next meeting. The legal advice that we received is very much on the basis that the council should await the outcome of the planning application this evening and any subsequent appeal before considering or beginning enforcement action. So I don't think it's necessary for us to bring a report to the next meeting. It's very much wait and see what happens in an appeal situation, and then we will consider the expediency of applying enforcement action.
Or alternatively, waiting until the period for appeal expires in 6 months' time.
I think we suspect it probably will be coming to a head quicker than that, Chairman.
Right, well that's interesting. I have no other items on the I have no other business unless members wish to raise any. And the next item to look at is the list of applications determined under delegated powers. Does any member wish to make any comment or ask any questions about that list of delegated decisions? Councillor Cleary.
I just have a couple of questions that are, well, some queries that I think can probably be dealt with out of the meeting, but I'll make inquiries.
And there is an appeal decision as well. I don't know if the officers want to speak about that.
Well, it's a very thorough appeal decision, Chairman. Members will probably recall this was an application refused by Planning Committee not that long ago, actually, in April, so it's quite a quick one for the Planning Inspectorate. But in essence, it was an application for, I think it was five dwellings, which were being promoted as self-build dwellings, but in open countryside at East Heslington. And the case was quite vociferously put, wasn't it, at the time, as to why we should grant permission on this brownfield site. Well, the inspector gave that pretty short shrift. So it was a useful decision in that sense, but would have been hugely disappointing had we not won that one, I think.
Thank you. Any questions? In that case, the agenda is finished. I'm going to close the meeting.